Hello and welcome back to the Culture Cave. Guys, it's that time of year, the most wonderful time of the year. Emmett's going to teach me about comic books. Hello, Emmett. Say hello to the
H-
people.
Hello to the people. I Anthony has so many very useful skills and so much great knowledge to give people. All I know is comic books, people. That's I am like a really terribly specced character in an RPG, and I've just put all of my skill points into comic books, and I'm useless at anything else. But in this one arena, it can be very handy,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know.
When I was creating the Culture Cave in the player creation screen, I was just like
Yeah.
maxing out Emmett's comic book skill.
Yeah, just like put it all into comic books. Take away charisma, take away intelligence, all into comic books.
It's working out so far. Like,
Eh,
we're having fun. We're having fun. So today
exactly.
we of course are here to talk about the first episode of Marvel's What If series, which Emmett will correct me if I'm wrong. It's a series which takes particular circumstances within the MCU and then spins them on their head with one slight alteration, which then causes a ripple effect and lots of things to change. And as far as I'm aware, every episode is going to be a standalone episode showing one change and what the ramifications of that change were. Emmett, was that correct?
Yes, it is. The What If brand has always been about usually a single change and how that diverts the path.
Mm-hmm.
And the TV show seems to be following in that stead, just more focused on the MCU/MC television shows timelines
Yes.
rather than the main Marvel comic books, which is, to be fair, the best course of action, as a lot of the people who will be watching this will be mostly integrated into the films. So smart move on their part from a branding point.
Yeah. No, I agree. But I will say before we start, well, actually, I'm sort of skipping ahead here because I wanted to say straight away it's interesting, and I maybe lay a bit of groundwork for me here because in this show they didn't just focus on Peggy Carter, who you would assume they would, because it's what if she became the super soldier and she
Mm-hmm.
becomes Captain Carter, but they also focused on Steve Rogers himself in this, which is that something that they usually do in What If as well? Do they usually take you down a couple of characters paths like they did in this one?
Well, it obviously depended on the issue. For reference for everyone, we'll talk about this more later, but there's been over like 200 issues of What If. But sometimes there will be a focused character piece, and sometimes they might be more focused on a specific event. This one again felt very focused on Peggy and Steve and how their relationship developed,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was very interesting because I think a lot of people make the joke obviously that Peggy was interested in Steve mostly when he got beefed out, but in this universe, she's the one that gets beefed out, and still that relationship develops because she was attracted not to the beefcake that he is, but the good, honest person that was underneath all of that, which I thought was very, very sweet. But yeah, it's good to
Mm-hmm.
see that like Steve just didn't get killed off in the opening, that they had a place for him in that story. It's nice to see different characters go in different directions with these stories, and I think that's what's so freeing about, or what's going to be so freeing about the What If brand, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I thought it was well. Steve escaped death twice in this episode. First of all, he was shot, and the second of all, it was whenever he was blown up. But he's escaped death twice. So even though he doesn't have super soldier serum within him, he actually is evading death quite well. What I
Yeah.
want to start with then, we can start from the very beginning. Then, how did you feel? Well, first of all, actually, let's just talk about overall. Did you like it? Did you like this first episode?
Yes, it was like some people were hoping for something like a more massive change. I think it
Mm-hmm.
was a good idea to take a very simple story with a simple change to begin with, because the first episode is almost like a proof of concept.
Yeah.
Like you have to kind of get like the audience, not always the terminally online people like ourselves, but
Mm-hmm.
like the more normie, on board with this kind of approach first. And I think taking the plot of one of the first Avenger films, Captain America, the first Avenger, and like alternating that leads to a very good, sort of outcome. It's easy to follow,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives you a good basis to run from. If they had jumped in with something a bit more complicated, I think you might have lost a few other people. But if you start with like a good action-based one with some nice character work, it kind of gets the audience more on board, I feel.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree with you. I did like it. I liked it overall. I thought that there were certain changes which I'm just like, okay, I understand what the show is. Sometimes the things that change won't make sense, but it's just all about fun. Like
Yeah.
I don't really understand why uh Tony Stark's thought of an Iron Man suit popped into the head of his father just because Peggy Carter stayed in the room. I thought that was a bit strange, if I'm honest with you.
Well, I think it was more because they had the Tesseract there, so
Yeah.
like Howard finally had a power source that he could use to power a big suit of armor like that, whereas like he wouldn't have had that in the main universe. I think it was mostly just an excuse to one, they've got a load of toys for it already,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
Hydra
yeah.
Stomper, and two, they wanted to keep Steve in the story, and the only way to do that was kind of to give him something else because unfortunately he is a very frail boy, a very sweet boy, but a very frail boy. So he needed something, you know.
Yeah, no. Let's not beat around the bush. I thought it was good. I did like it. I just thought it was pretty funny. The
It was,
idea
yeah.
that just because his son had the idea at one point, he also had the idea. It was too similar for me
Yeah.
to really without to not pass it without comment. But overall, I like that they kept Steve in it. They sort of did the same thing with him as they did with Bruce Banner in Infinity War, didn't they? Because he couldn't turn into the Hulk anymore, so they put him into the
Yeah.
Hulk Buster or Hulk Smasher or whatever that thing's called.
Yeah, the
Um,
Hulk Buster.
yeah, the Hulk Buster. So they put him into there, and so this is the same sort of thing. Steve Rogers isn't his like hulky self anymore. He's not the super soldier, but he's got his own Hulk Buster, the Hydra
Yeah.
Smasher, which I thought was pretty cool. Now they did speed through quite a lot of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you
I
think
think
about?
I think that's going to be because the episodes seem to be around about half an hour. I
Mhm.
feel that that's going to be a criticism that can be lobbied against a lot of episodes. In the same way that with some What If comics, only having one issue means that you're
Mhm.
very limited on time. I think we should be prepared going
Yes,
forward
yes,
that
yes.
a lot of these episodes are going to be very fast paced. That won't always work well for some stories, but for this one, that was quite action packed and basically sort of retelling or telling a different version of like the events of like
Hmm.
Captain America First Avenger. Like you can sort of think back to that film and fill in some of the blanks using that, but with the framework that we have.
Hmm.
So I think, it's not going to work for everyone, but like you're going to have to, sacrifices will unfortunately have to be made for the format, if you get
Hmm.
me.
No, I get
Yeah.
you. Like this one, which was following the same plot as another film. Yes, if they all followed the same plot of other films but slightly changed, I think it would lose a bit. So I'm expecting some absolutely crazy, all over the place ones coming up. But this one I thought was pretty good. I think it still kept a bit of the heart. The actual image on the screen, like the lighting
Mm.
that they were drawing, the actual drawings were really really lovely. I thought it was a really good looking show.
Animation is absolutely gorgeous, and the action scenes were surprisingly good. Like,
Hmm.
obviously Marvel do like a lot of action movie stuff, but like just like watching Peggy like demolishing like all sorts of like cars and stuff. My favorite, like the little montage where she and Steve are up in the air fighting Nazi planes, and she's like
Hmm.
leaping into the planes, and Steve's catching her, and she's jumping onto the back. A lot of really fun little like choreographed wee scenes there, which I so dug. Like it's
Yeah.
I was surprised that they spent so much time on like making those action scenes like as fun as they were. And
Yeah,
Haley
yeah.
Atwell is like
Hmm.
just great. She's very charismatic, even just as a voice actress. Like she's really great.
Yeah, no, I thought
You
it
know?
was really, really good. It's kind of I got kind of the vibes of like Rocket and Thor from Infinity War as well, when she was jumping on the back of him and like jumping off with her shield. I just like the idea of Rocket being on Thor's shoulders. It was sort of the same scale. I thought I quite liked that. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did Hugo Weaving do a voice in this? Did he come back for this or not?
He might have. I
A
would have
few
to double
people did.
check
I
the
don't know
count.
if I saw his name. Stanley Tucci seems to have, unless they didn't, and they just put the names up there to make it seem more legit. But I don't think Hugo Weaving's name was there actually. But I think Stanley Tucci's was. I think, or maybe they just reused dialogue. I'm not sure.
It's possible that there's a lot of little tricks you can get away from it. I have to double check. I did enjoy the fact that Tommy Lee Jones' character was killed off very quickly. I leaned over to my partner and made a joke of being like, "Well, we couldn't afford Tommy Lee Jones, so we'll just nip that problem in the butt." But
Yeah,
it
yeah.
did they at least made something out of it. Whereas like we wouldn't have had as many scenes of like Captain Carter getting a lot of pushback
Hmm.
from I think Tommy Lee Jones's character because I feel like his general would have been much more accepting of her by like having that other general character who was much more dismissive of her around.
Hmm.
It meant that there was more pushback and an antagonism to sort of work through as part of her arc there.
Yeah, and I think it worked because of the era it's set in. Like they're being very realistic to the era. I think that I personally feel, and now I don't want to speak for women in the audience of these shows, but I personally feel now that the girl power, I think we've sort of evolved past that. I just want to see, like, and it makes sense in the show. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing the show because it is set in an era like in the late 30s, 40s, where that was very prevalent, and you need to show that is actually the way it would go. You don't want to ignore that. But I think we're ready now. Maybe let me know in the comments if you agree with me, guys. I think we're ready now to move into the next phase of women representation in lead roles. In that we don't always have to wink at the camera and say girl power anymore, although if you want to do it, fair enough. I just think that we're at the stage now where it's like, no, we just need to like make sure we're doing it, because you know how it, like, Conrad and I have talked about this before, where like Disney will wink at the camera and say, look, we're doing it, you know. Whereas I think we just need to see it now. I think we need to stop the wink at the camera and see it now. And that's speaking as someone who loved the moment in Endgame when all the women joined up. I love that moment, but I think we're ready for
very cool.
Stop winking now.
Yeah, well, I think it's that issue with a lot of mainstream films and like pop feminism, where it's like a little wink and a nudge towards feminism without actually ever doing anything to really push the agenda of feminism, which I think is a shame. Like, because with such a massive film franchise and so many great female characters, there's a lot of opportunity to push some like real points, instead of just being like, look, it's a superhero movie, but it's a woman beating the people up. Isn't that very progressive? It's like, you can tell. But I think this one, I described this What If with my partner as being like a really interesting mix of Captain America: First Avenger and then the TV show Agent Carter, which was a continuation of Peggy's character past First Avenger, because we're watching that at the moment. And a big theme within that show is post-war, the tension as men came back from the front and women were pushed out of their roles, and Peggy being like one of the most competent people in the room but struggling to be heard because of like ingrained sexism. So like the issues that she sort of confronted when she was Captain Carter, essentially the most powerful soldier in the war, but being ignored by that one general because again, ingrained sexism was very sort of like interlocked there. So it's very interesting to be watching Peggy Carter at the same time, and then also watch this what if episode. I almost said what if issue in the middle of it. So like it flows quite nicely.
Yeah, exactly. And it is. It's. I think that's interesting that you're watching that at the same time. Actually, I've never watched that show, but apparently it was
honestly
good.
Really good.
Yeah,
honestly, really good. Yeah, it was one of those ones where it was awkward at the time for us to go watch it, but like now that it's up on Disney Plus, if anyone wants a fun little sort of spy show with some commentary, on gender roles back in the day, worth a watch.
Yeah, awesome, good stuff. So overall, I think we're agreeing. This was a good start to the series. I liked the Hydra monster coming through the portal at the end. The way they ended with her in the future. Sort of, it's funny because it kind of makes you think like, okay, now I want to see what happened like in the Battle of New York with Peggy Carter, but it's not really the same.
This is what I wanted to talk about. It's like I'm hoping and praying that some of the stories that we see in this first season maybe get like sequel episodes in later seasons. Doesn't have to be next series, just maybe somewhere down the line. I would love to see like, what if Captain Carter led the Avengers? That would be fun. That would be a great continuation. And like her getting to see how like the world has developed and how like the women's movement has like moved forward and such. That would be really fun. Before he was revealed to have survived the train explosion, I was wondering if we were going to have like a what if Steve Rogers was the Winter Soldier or something like that. That might have been an interesting turn. Not sure how they would have done it, but would have been kind of an interesting sort of spin on it as well.
I personally thought whenever that explosion happened, that he was going to go into the ice and then be woken up like he was before, but Tony Stark would be there and he would continue his father's work, and Steve Rogers would be the new Iron Man. That's what I thought. And like Tony Stark would design it for him,
That would be interesting. I'm not sure if Tony would necessarily want anyone hogging his spotlight, but we'll see.
No, but I mean, yeah, I know that. But
I'm joking. I'm just
In
I'm
this
winding
world,
up the
it would have
Tony
been
fans.
known that Steve was the original wearer of the suit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the original Iron Man.
He was the original Iron Man, basically. Okay, so Emmett. Okay, guys, that was Captain Carter. Great episode. I'm looking forward to next week. I'm not even going to look about. I just want to be a surprise next week. Don't know which one's coming up next week, but Emmett has. We're gonna in this first episode. We're gonna take the next sort of 5-10 minutes. If you only wanted to hear about episode 1, there, see you later. We want to talk about what if, and a bit of the history of the comics, because it actually is a long-running comic series that they're sort of drawing upon the ideas of, I suppose not the ideas of, but the essence of for this show.
The concept of,
The concept of, and I like this would have happened whether we were recording or not. Emmett was going to explain it to me, and we were going to talk about it. So we thought we may as well put it at the end of this first episode, just in case anyone else isn't really au fait with the comic series. So Emmett, let's go.
Yes. So basically, the What If comic series has been kind of going since the 70s on and off. There hasn't always been a big ongoing series, but there's been a couple of different volumes. The first volume was like 1 to 50 issues, but like the biggest volume was in the 80s and 90s, and the series lasted for 115 issues. It is an absolutely crazy amount. And then since then, we've had small little mini series which take little shots at different parts of the Marvel universe and sort of do a wee bit of a spin on them. Much like the TV show, most of them have been presented by our mysterious, bald viewer known as the Watcher, Uatu. And he sort of recounts how, he would be the framing device that sort of shows, it's like, this is how it went in the world that but, in other worlds, things diverge slightly. Yeah. And he has been like the sort of one of the few sort of recurring elements in What If for a long time. He's not always been there, but he's been one of the most constant figures. The first ever issue of What If is this little bad boy here, which is, for reference, what if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four, which is a callback to the first ever issue of Spider-Man, where he broke into the Fantastic Four's Baxter building to basically audition to be a member of the Fantastic Four. But he pulled out when he found out that he couldn't get paid for it because he really needed the money. But in this universe, Susan Storm's like, hey, Reed, we're pretty rich. We could probably find some money to pay this poor kid. And he joins and becomes a member of the Fantastic Four.
Do they become the Fantastic Five?
They do become the Fantastic Five until the end, where they maybe drop back down to 4 for some reason. That's
but we're not telling you the answer to that one.
Exactly. And talking about sequel stories to What If stories, this book has actually got 1 or 2 What If stories itself that follow different versions of the ending. So it's not just one continuation, it's other continuations as well. So like What Ifs will sometimes spin off into their own universe. One that we'll probably talk about at one stage was what if Peter Parker and Mary Jane's daughter survived, which span out into a whole new comic line for Marvel for a little bit, set in the future. Yeah, where like all the superheroes' kids were now the heroes and doing stuff. It was this MC2, which was started by Spider-Girl.
Oh, is that that one, Descendants? Is that the one?
Like the Disney show. Yeah. That would be a fun crossover. But again, and this is just another one of my absolute favorite ones. One of the ones that first started my little collection of What Ifs. I say a little collection, I've got hundreds of these issues now, but it's What If Captain America. And it was an interesting little series where they took heroes and put them into different periods in time. And the Captain America one here is what if Captain America lived during the American Civil War instead of World War II, and we get a very different story because of that. And that's they're all very interesting.
During the American Civil War, so what side was he fighting on? Interesting. Well, obviously America. On America's side, yeah.
He was a Union soldier. He wasn't on the Confederacy. Yeah. But interestingly, the comic actually indicates that the Union side was not completely all saintly. Like he ends up being injured when he tries to stop some of his own soldiers
Hmm.
from like looting too much on a town that they're attacking, and they turn on him and stab him, and like he gets dragged away and treated by a medicine man who, you know, a young black man who was raised by Native Americans, who is the Sam Wilson of this world,
Oh,
who
yes.
helped pass on the powers of Captain America to him. So he becomes not a figure of either the Union or the Confederacy, but America as a whole, rather than anything else. And you know, it's very interesting on that side. So his powers, instead of
Okay.
coming from science in this in the world that we know,
Yeah.
they come from a mystical source instead.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, and a fun little tidbit is his shield. When he throws it, it turns into like a bird, like an energy bird that hits things. It's very fun. I really dig it, and you
That
know,
sounds cool. That is that. This is really. I sent Emmett a text last night and said, "Stop making me want to read comic books. I have no time. I have no time to read comic books, honestly." But this just sounds so cool. Like I can imagine just like once you've read one, you just find another one. If you're like, yeah, I need to read that one too. You just like it's just you just want to gobble them up, you know?
yeah, I will say that the one series that this episode of What If reminded me of, that technically isn't a what if, but basically is,
Hmm.
was this little series here called Bullet Points, where you can see a Steve Rogers holding an assassinated Dr. Erskine. In that world, the fate of the Marvel Universe. It was a mini series of about 5 issues long, written by J. Michael Straczynski, which some of the audience might know as the writer of Babylon 5 and a couple of other interesting shows. But the fate of the Marvel Universe is changed when an assassin manages to shoot Dr. Erskine before he can create the super soldier serum. So Captain America, Steve Rogers, volunteers for a different project,
Okay.
Project Iron Man, and he becomes the first ever Iron Man. But that's not all. This series goes really mental because the Bullet also manages to kill a young private that was with the Doctor, a Private Ben Parker, the uncle of a Peter Parker,
Whoa.
which leads to Peter's life being like a completely changed without that father figure. And through a convoluted series of events, leads to Peter Parker not becoming Spider-Man, but becoming the Hulk. You know,
Whoa. So this is
yeah,
properly a what if story. Yeah.
yeah, it's like one bullet spins the universe out into a whole different direction with people becoming all sorts of different characters. Definitely worth a read if anyone's sort of interested in that. But you know, it's the one that sort of this what if episode sort of reminded me the most of. And modern day now, we're doing a couple more miniseries, more like bullet points,
Hmm.
where we're taking like a concept and breaking it out into more of a mini series rather than just single issues, which, you know, obviously this first episode was very fast paced, didn't really have a whole lot of time to breathe.
Hmm.
But with a mini series, instead of just one issue, you can expand the story out and really explore it a wee bit more, you know?
Okay, that sounds awesome. Well, I'm
Yeah.
sure as we go through the show, what if you're going to recognize certain elements from certain comic books, and you might be able to sort of talk about us a little bit more there. But thanks very much, Emma. That was very very useful. And guys, we'll be back next week with episode 2 of Marvel's What If. So join us then. We're going to try and get these up. At some point towards the end of the week, if we can get it up on a Wednesday, brilliant. But we can't really promise an exact schedule of them out. But you know what we can promise? It will be out after the episode is put on. We don't have the inside track. We're not getting
Yeah.
them early from Disney. They'll be out after. That's what we can promise you. All right, guys.
Imagine if we did. That would be
Oh yeah.
great.
Oh geez, that would just be classic. That would be. I imagine if they contacted a small little YouTube channel like the Culture Cave and said, you know what, let's give them the link.
Just for you, you're getting to see these episodes early.
Yeah, yeah,
So.
exactly. All right, guys. Thanks very much, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.